We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Free Association Radio, broadcasting live from South Central Texas. This is Robert Phoenix, and you are listening to the Friday Farcast. It is February 15th, and we are topping off a memorable week in the world of symbols, images, events, and history all unfolding before our very eyes, ladies and gentlemen. It started off on Monday with the dramatic announcement that the current Pope, Pope Benedict, will be stepping down on February the 28th. It is the first Pope since the 11th century that has stepped down and has not died either naturally or through some other means while holding the office of the papacy, the Pope, the Father, the global father of Catholics and the representative of God here on earth. So it's been since the 11th century since this has actually occurred. And just 2 days later, I believe it was, actually 1 day later, on the 12th, we had the Christopher Dorner event come to a fiery conclusion. And there is a wealth of symbolism around Chris Dorner and what happened then on the back end of the Pope's resignation. And then just yesterday, we had a massive fireball strike the Ural region, the Ural Mountains of Russia, just outside of Kazakhstan. And reports are anywhere from 100 to 1,000 people have been injured. Very dramatic footage showing up all over the internet, and reports of other meteors or meteorites hitting the planet, one just recently in Cuba in the last few hours. And of course, right now, as we speak, or as I speak and you listen, there is an asteroid within 175,000 miles of the planet being tracked live. So these are dramatic times, and obviously more drama ahead. And today we are absolutely blessed to have somebody who can help us sort through some of these events and others like Sandy Hook, which is now fading recently and rapidly down into the memory hole as it was replaced by Chris Dorner and even to a lesser extent Oscar Pistorius and the murder of his girlfriend, model girlfriend in South Africa. But we have somebody here that can help us sort through it all, and perhaps then some. It's my great pleasure to bring on Alfred Weber. And Alfred was, he's here because a lot of you wanted him here. I asked, who do you want on the show? And immediately I got many responses for Alfred. So I went out and sought Alfred to be my friend on Facebook, and we connected, and we agreed upon this day, and it probably couldn't be a better day in terms of sorting through some material. So without further delay, let's bring on the man of the moment, Alfred Labramonte Weber. Hello, sir.
Yeah, you know, and I started off my day with a conversation with two scientists in Moscow who I'll be speaking to again Monday, and they have further predictions of 2013 as a year of, quote, mass catastrophe. So that I think that all of the harbingers that you spoke about at the beginning of the program form a pattern, and there's a very real question as to whether we're headed toward a catastrophic timeline or a positive timeline. And this is a year that about which there have been many scientifically based predictions of a catastrophic timeline, and there have also been indications that perhaps the timeline has shifted to a positive timeline. So we could talk about that and talk about the individual points that you brought up, namely the papacy and the Vatican, because some of the predictions go back. The prophecy of Saint Malachi of this pope being the last pope, or the next pope being the last pope, and is that tied into the catastrophic timeline? Because is the next pope the last pope? Because we're going to go into a catastrophic timeline, and it all ends in a global coastal event in June 2013, where Rome is wiped out along with all other coastal cities around the planet by meteors or solar flares accompanying the Nemesis or Planet X system.
Yeah.
We're kind of at a convergence of the catastrophic timeline, and one could say, well, were the various meteorites today, one that hit Russia and the other Cuba? I like to call the Cuba one Kuwasi Yankee no. I'm a Canadian American citizen who grew up in Cuba and went through the whole Cuban Revolution and the Castro years. So it's very ironic that a meteor hit both Russia and Cuba. It is, wow.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like the universe has a sense of humor, so it just begins to make you wonder whether or not we live inside an intelligent time-space hologram whose purpose is not to destroy humanity, but to wake it up.
Right.
And so we can go through all of this at a fine detail, but at the same time, step back and not get lost in the trees and lose the view of the forest.
Well, it's easy to do because it seems like, Alfred, and by the way, thank you for taking time to be on the show. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, no. Look, I feel so honored that your listeners asked that I appear there. I spent the better part of 5 or 6 years down at the lower Rio Grande Valley in Texas. So I feel that I have roots there. Back in the 90s, I was one of the administrators at the Brownsville Community Health Center,
mm-hmm.
and I got to know that whole area, both the ecology of it and the sociology of it, and I got to know Texas. And it was when I met George W. Bush, who was then governor of Texas, at a bill signing in Brownsville on the same day that he executed a Mexican prisoner against the recommendation of Pope John Paul II, that I walked out and the birds told me, "You've got to get back to Canada and help save the world." so here I am.
Checking in with Texas. Well, let's start with the papacy, because I think that this kicks the whole week off in a very unique and almost biblical way here in terms of perhaps revelation and the prophecy of Malachi. Let's start there, and let's get your take on him stepping down, why he's stepping down, and some of the reverberations that you're already picking up as a result of this.
Yeah, well, I will kind of lay out a version, and whether or not this version is the historical truth will remain to be seen. But I think it's a very important one, and that is that for some time now I've been an informal advisor to an organization known as the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State, the international secretary of which is the Reverend Kevin Annett, and this is based in Belgium, in Brussels, Belgium, and it has been examining war crimes and child genocide perpetrated by both the Vatican, the Pope, and the British Crown, the British Queen, the Windsors. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to start out just reading a statement that came out from the tribunal. I've been working with them closely, and I can't say that this is why the Pope stepped down, but I think that it is an important part of the mix, perhaps. And so this, I'll just say this, okay. Number one, on Friday, February 1st, 2013, we're now on February 15th, on the basis of evidence supplied by our affiliated common law court of justice, people can go to itccs.org to see all of this. The International Tribunal concluded an agreement with representatives of a European nation, they don't name the nation, and its courts to secure an arrest warrant against Joseph Ratzinger, a.k.a. Pope Benedict, for crimes against humanity and ordering a criminal conspiracy. Number two, this arrest warrant was to be delivered to the Office of the Holy See in Rome on Friday, February 15th. That's today, 2013. It allowed the nation in question to detain Ratzinger as a suspect in a crime if he entered its sovereign territory. Number three, it may be that nation was Rome, was Italy, by the way, so that if the Pope went out of the Vatican into Italy, he would be seized and arrested. Number three, a diplomatic note was issued by said nation's government to the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone, on Monday, February 4th, 2013, informing Bertone of the impending arrest warrant and inviting his office to comply. No reply to this note was received from Cardinal Bertone or his office, but 6 days later, Pope Benedict resigned. Okay? Mm. So, number four, the agreement between our tribunal and said nation, and I'll go into afterward what's occurred between the President of Italy and the Pope, which comes after this. Okay. The agreement between our tribunal and said nation included a second provision to issue a commercial lien through that nation's courts against the property and wealth of the Roman Catholic Church, commencing on Easter Sunday, March 31st, 2013. The lien was to be accompanied by a public and global Easter reclamation campaign, whereby Catholic Church property was to be occupied and claimed by citizens as public assets, forfeited under international law and the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Now, it is true that there has been a complaint brought against the Pope and the Vatican at the International Criminal Court by lawyers of the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York. And that is part of this because the secretary of the tribunal has been working with the lawyers from the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York that brought the complaint at the International Criminal Court against the Pope and the Vatican. So this is a coordinated international effort by public interest prosecutors going after an international war crimes organization known as the Vatican and its head known as the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
Number 5, it is the decision of our tribunal and the said nation's government to proceed with the arrest of Joseph Ratzinger upon his vacating the office of the Roman Pontiff on a charge of crimes against humanity and criminal conspiracy. Now, those charges have been brought with a suit at the International Criminal Court. Number 6, it is our further decision to proceed as well with the indictment and arrest of Joseph Ratzinger's successor as Pope on the same charges and to enforce a commercial lien. In closing, the tribunal acknowledges that Pope Benedict's complicity in criminal activities of the Vatican Bank, IOR, was compelling his eventual dismissal by the highest officials of the Vatican. But according to our sources, Secretary of State Tarcisio Bertone forced Joseph Ratzinger's resignation immediately and in direct response to the diplomatic note concerning the arrest warrant that was issued by him to him by said nation's government on February 4th, 2013. We call upon all citizens and governments to assist our efforts to legally and directly disestablish the Vatican, Inc., and arrest its chief officers and clergy who are complicit in crimes against humanity and the ongoing criminal conspiracy to aid and protect child torture and trafficking, issued 13 February 2013. Now, today's 15 February 2013, so things are moving very, very rapidly. And I'd like to pause here, but there's further news that I'd like to share also.
Sure.
Yeah, so why don't we stop here and kind of get your thoughts, and you know, because there was just a lot to digest in what I said.
Yeah, my thoughts on it are, well, it goes in a couple different directions. I mean, when I see what's happening to the papacy and the church, one of the things that I flash on is the proclamation by Albert Pike, which talks about the desecration of faith across a number of different religions, so that there will come a time when people will essentially be robbed of any kind of faith. They won't have any spiritual center. And as a result, they'll be looking outside of their normal sphere of influence or the places inside themselves that give them faith. And then at that point, there would be a new form of religion that would be offered up for the masses. So on one level, I kind of see this as falling in line with Pike's prophecy. And on a more practical level, and this is a question that I would ask you, how far would this investigation go? I mean, one of the things that we saw last year was the arrest of Jerry Sandusky and the beginning of uncovering a pedophile ring in Penn State, which obviously is much deeper than just the arrest and the incarceration of Jerry Sandusky or the or the death of Joe Paterno, and applying those charges to Paterno in past tense, in a place where he can't defend himself, which is why his family just went out and brought forth their 200-page report to try to clear his name. So I guess for me, there are two things happening. One, how this relates to the Pike prophecy, and two, how deep does this go? Can we root out some of the other networks that are apparently associated, or hopefully they're associated with what is churning beneath the surface of this conspiracy and scandal in the Vatican?
Well, those are two very excellent questions. Just to deal with the pedophile ring, which ties into the Pope Benedict question, and also to the Sandusky question, and also to Sandy Hook, because one of the models that are put forth on Sandy Hook, and your listeners can go to exopolitics.com to see the full expression of this, is that Sandy Hook was not only a false flag, but that the purported 20 students which were killed were actually abducted into the CIA/Vatican-run global pedophile ring, i.e., the University of Pennsylvania Sandusky. That was the tip of the iceberg of the pedophile ring. One of the chief executive officers of that pedophile ring, who was protected, for whom Sandusky served as kind of the scapegoat, was George H.W. Bush. And pedophilia serves as one of the main organizing principles of the international CIA and what I call the International War Crimes Organization, kind of their organizational cement. Mm-hmm. I've read recently of, for example, reports from Asia where they had women, all of these women, highly educated North American women, with college graduate degrees and members of NGOs, and they were at this meeting in kind of a brain trust meeting in Asia to discuss the plans for their NGOs, and all of these women were in this common area in their hammocks, and each one had in bed a young Asian, 10 to 14-year-old in their bed, woman, mm-hmm. woman on woman. So, and that's the function that the CIA, Vatican, because it's all a single global crime network, crime syndicate. Mm-hmm. Pedophilia has served. It serves as this organizational cement, and also there's compromise. If anybody ever tries to break out, well, they can just be discredited, as Sandusky was. Right. And they, so they just send Sandusky as a scapegoat, and then, that took care of the problem. Right. Forever. Yeah. And so there's one version of what happened to Sandy Hook, in that there were there were multiple teams coming in in false flags. One of the methodology is that they're built around drills. For example, that's what occurred in 9/11, which is a classic false flag. They had multiple drills occurring on that day of airliners being hijacked mm-hmm. by passengers. Right. So there's all this confusion. And on that day, there was a drill going on in a nearby city of a school being taken over by shooters. So they used that drill as the parallel drill for the false flag at Sandy Hook. So that one version of this, and you can go to exopolitics.com and see the actual diagrams of how this was done, of layer on layer, and creating media confusion between the drill and the actual event, where the two shooters initially went, and these are undercover shooters, these are black ops shooters, went to Adam Lanza and his mother's house. Adam Lanza was staying with his mother, went in, told Adam Lanza, "Oh, you're coming to a drill this morning," and he went willingly. Then the other shooter stayed behind, shot Adam Lanza's mother in her bed so that they could pin it on Adam Lanza, and meanwhile Adam Lanza was taken as the patsy, not to the drill, but over to Sandy Hook.
Mm-hmm.
And then at Sandy Hook, there was a false flag where a whole number of the students there were told that they were going to participate in a drill, and then 20 of them were taken away into CIA, Vatican pedophile networks, which are run out of Fairfield University in Connecticut, which was founded in 1942 by the Jesuits and the Vatican to run MKUltra and pedophile networks in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Which I know well because I used to have a summer house in Kent, Connecticut, which is right by Sandy Hook.
Right.
So that is how, and so the perspective now, from a legal point of view, and the core of the complaint at the International Criminal Court is of the Pope and the Vatican as an international criminal organization. You can look at canon law, and that provision of canon law, which prohibits priests from cooperating with law enforcement authorities when there's an accusation of pedophilia against priests, is called crimen solicitatus. You can look at that as the same thing as omertà inside the mafia.
Mm-hmm.
So now, what has occurred is that the Vatican and the Pope have been outed, and there's a quantum of evidence to a prima facie evidence to bring indictments against them as a global criminal war crimes organization engaged in genocide against children. Now, there are then the historical and the kind of dimensional questions that you raise, i.e., is the Vatican just kind of the shill for dimensional warfare in this dimension by, say, by negative ETs such as the Orion Greys and the Draco reptilians, and various, quote, satanic entities, so that the Vatican is the rollout and the CIA Vatican pedophile networks are the rollout of a negative ET agenda on the planet, part of the exopolitical spiritual warfare that's occurring on this planet. And that's yet another perspective, so that there are forces, say, who would represent the ethical upper dimensional human ETs, kind of the Pleiadian and Alpha Centaurian and kind of source-oriented civilizations versus the predatory interveners of the Anunnaki, the the reptilian, the Draco reptilian, and the Orion Greys, who have, according to a 1964 U.S. intelligence report, they have targeted this quadrant of the galaxy, specifically Earth and Mars and their moons, for occupation sometime through 2000 and 2050, and that's what this war has been all about. And so that's what the Illuminati occupation has been. It's really been in aid of a reptilian and gray occupation of the planet, and part of the spiritual struggle of the last phases, say, of the, quote, satanic or Luciferic rebellion, which occurred at spiritual levels in this quadrant of the galaxy. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, historically, my evaluation is that we're kind of toward the resolution of that. Mm-hmm. And while looking at Pike's point of view, he says, well, humanity is going to be disabused of their religion, and then the issue is, does then a false religion of, quote, the New World Order, the New Age religion, the New World Order comes in and they all become Satanists or Luciferists? Well, that's kind of a catastrophic view. A different view is that humanity comes in and we get back to our original blueprint before the Anunnaki intervention into the Homo sapiens experiment as 12-strand DNA light beings in the third dimension.
Right.
And that is that, hey, we're on this planet, there's an integration of science and spirituality. All religions are just political control organizations who attempt to use memes of cosmology to affect political and mind control. So that from a positive point of view, the fall of religion now, which I predicted to be one of the top 10 trends of 2013, is a very salutary thing, because we'll have now the free competition of ideas, and you'll have the spiritual materialism of the New World Order, but we can also have an authentic emergence of science and spirituality, and each individual human being able to think for themselves, which I think is a planetary ideal. So it's not necessary to fall into the duality that Pike, I think, projected. Mm-hmm. We're moving away from an age of duality into an age of unity consciousness. And that's the significance of December 21st, 2012, and moving into a new journey around the ecliptic, and around the galactic center, which is really a spiral.
Right.
And that's kind of my answer to your question.
Well, one of the things that jumps, there are a number of things that jump out at me as a result of that. The first, going back a few minutes, and the Sandy Hook scenario, where the agents come to Nancy Lanza's house and tell Adam Lanza that he's going to be part of this event. One of the things that strikes me as unusual about that scenario is that everything that we heard about Nancy Lanza was how protective she was of Adam. And if that's the case, and those two agents went there, what would prompt Nancy Lanza to release Adam into their hands? How did that occur?
I think it occurred with a 38 millimeter or 38 gun that shot her, killed her.
So do you think they put a gun to her head and say, "Hey, we're taking your kid"? Is that how it went down?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it wasn't of her own volition. She just said, "You got to go."
Oh no. That is, this is a black op, and Adam was targeted as the patsy, and they were using the drill. There were multiple drills going on. There was a drill nearby, and also the third graders, for example, in Sandy Hook, were told that they were participating in a drill. So there were multiple levels of drills going on.
Right.
And there were certain targets that were to be murdered by the shooters in a black ops fashion. And one of them was Adam Lanza, and then a number of adults, and then one hypothesis is that the 20 children were taken into Vatican CIA pedophile networks, because why would a satanic network waste 20 children?
Right.
And that's a center. Fairfield University, in that center of Connecticut, is a center of Satanism and of MK Ultra and of the satanic networks. Right there, the author of Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger, was an OSS operative during World War II. Right after that, he was deployed around Fairfield University as an MK Ultra operative, and was tasked to write Catcher in the Rye, which contains all of the MK Ultra trigger words. And that was made to be required reading of all high school students and college students in the U.S.
Right.
So now all college students and high school students in the U.S. are brainwashed with MK Ultra trigger words.
I've never read that book, by the way.
And so that's why you have this nation that the president can get on TV and go, tourists, the tourists coming, the tourists, and a huge part of the nation goes, Jawohl, yeah, we're gonna attack them, kill them, go, because they've been brainwashed, and they don't have a clue. I mean, and so that this is just part of the backstory, and Sandy Hook is the 19th of these MK Ultra events. Now, this is getting away from the Pope Benedict, but the central point is that the Vatican, which is the CIA, is kind of a subdivision of the Vatican, and their turf is to protect Dope Inc., which is gold, oil, and drugs, and so the comeuppance, what can be proved against the Vatican now is, number one, pedophilia, genocide, war crimes against children, and number two, financial war crimes. So those are the two aspects that are the twin twin charges in the action at the International Criminal Court, and that were apparently part of the putative arrest warrant. Now, this is a second piece that I'd like to mention, which just came out yesterday. And people can go to itccs.org, and this is the International Tribunal. and that is that Ratzinger has scheduled a meeting with the Italian president, Giorgio Napolitano, for Saturday, February 23rd, to discuss securing protection and immunity from prosecution from the Italian government. So it was so what happened is that it was the Italian government possibly that had issued, although we don't know for sure, it may have been the Italian government or from an undisclosed European government stating that they would issue an arrest warrant for Ratzinger. So he then resigned on orders from Bertoni, who's kind of the coup master, who's the Secretary of State. It's very interesting because myself and a number of exopolitical colleagues wrote Bertoni around 2007 asking him to make a public declaration about disclosure on ETs, and we never got a response from him.
Right.
So, just on the theory that the Vatican Secretary of State should be the one to deal with the ETs. So, we've dealt with Bertoni's office on ET issues. Now, and the parties dealing with now Bertoni's office with Giorgio Napolitano's office,
right?
Yeah, are parties that I've dealt with very closely for 10 years. Kevin Annett at the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State, and now the latest is a letter from the tribunal to the president, President Giorgio Napolitano of Italy, and I'll just read for it because none of this is front page stuff in Italy, but it's not being reported in the U.S.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the letter says, I need not remind you, Mr. President, that under international law and treaties that have been ratified by you in Italy, you and your government are forbidden from granting such protection, i.e. protection from arrest, to those like Joseph Ratzinger who have aided and abetted criminal actions, such as ordering bishops and cardinals in America and elsewhere to protect known child rapists among their clergy. Your obligation to the Vatican through the Lateran Treaty that I think was that was negotiated between Pope Pius XII and Mussolini. Your obligation to the Vatican through the Lateran Treaty does not negate or nullify the requirements of these higher moral and international laws, nor does it require that you give any protection or immunity to a single individual like Joseph Ratzinger, especially after he has left his papal office. So, here we have the question of Ratzinger is going to leave his office at the end of February. He's having a meeting with the president of Italy on the 23rd to try to get immunity so he can spend his last days, if he doesn't get murdered before then, or, during then, in some convent in Italy, right? And he's trying to get immunity from the president of Italy, right, on that February 23rd meeting. So the parties that are prosecuting him at the International Criminal Court and that had met with the undisclosed nation that took out that said we're going to issue an arrest warrant on February 15th, that's today, are now writing the president of Italy and says you cannot under the Lateran Treaty, grant this guy immunity. So all of that's up in the air now.
Interesting stuff. So I have a way out for the Pope. Here's his back door.
Okay.
Are you ready? All right.
Yeah.
So the Pope's back door would be to get to the Ecuadorian embassy where Julian Assange is, right? And the two of them could hang out there, and then they could have a reality show together. I think it would be brilliant. Don't you?
That's kind of the ultimate in theater. No, these are because these are a billion Catholics. What are they going to think? Well, the thing is that this is the fall of a criminal organization.
It's huge. It is huge.
And even with the rise of the Catholic Church, I mean, what the Catholic Church is if you go back to around 325 AD, what happened is that the Roman emperor morphed into the Pope,
mm-hmm.
and the Roman Empire morphed into the Catholic Church. It had nothing to do with Jesus at all.
Right.
It was just an institutional way that the Roman Empire, which was like the power, the world power at that time, saw this as a way to continue existing, to cease being so much of a military power, to morph into the Pope, and then to continue to just treat all, to be the King of Kings, to have authority over all the monarchies and all the people worldwide, through the confessionals, to have the largest spy agency in the world, because all of the confessionals, all of the sins were reported directly back to the papacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And through papal mind control to mind control the world. And since the Vatican was operating directly in conjunction with satanic and Draco and Gray kind of agendas, that's how they were controlling the planet.
Interesting. So let's talk about numbers here for a second. How many practicing Catholics are there worldwide? In the billions, right?
Well, I think the world practicing, you see, this is kind of a gray area, no pun intended.
Right.
It's not like how many American citizens are there,
yeah.
or how many people live in the U.S. or in Canada, because the numbers, I think, are about. In fact, we can look it up as we speak. But I think that they're about 1 billion or so, and I think Okay, Catholic numbers worldwide. Okay, let's look at this. Oops. Well, anyway.
1 billion sounds right.
Yeah. So, so you're dealing about, 1/7 of humanity, but its political clout is great because it has many secret organizations. It's tentacles into banking.
Right.
It's interlocking with the CIA,
mm-hmm.
and with the Bilderbergers and with the monarchies. For example, under the secret Treaty of Verona, it controls all of the monarchies. That's why the Pope always precedes the Queen of England, and so these are very powerful entities politically, and the Church controls a great deal of wealth in terms of property, and just clout generally?
Well, this was another question I was going to ask you in terms of numbers, because some of the research I've done has to do with black families, black nobility that currently reside in Italy and have been around, pre-Medici era, but still very powerful and very, very wealthy. You don't really hear about them very much. You hear about the Rothschild clan and Rockefellers and so on, but there is a large group of people, a small group of people in Italy that are extremely powerful and have been for a long time. And in my research, I've come across that their wealth is tied into the Catholic Church, and that's how they actually disguise a lot of their wealth. What happens to some of these families as a result of this?
Well, that's a good question. If my guess is this, is that the power structure is trying to manipulate this as a Penn State situation. Who was the name again of the coach there?
Paterno.
Yeah. So that Paterno Pope, right?
Well,
Paterno father.
Well, Joe is Paternus. It's the father, right? I mean.
Yeah, father. Paterno equals Pope.
Yeah.
So that we got rid of the Paterno, we got rid of the Pope, so that then there's the great washing of hands. It's kind of like Watergate.
Yeah. Interesting.
Like, actually, things got worse after Watergate. Really.
No, they did. Then we had Gerald Ford eventually, and then a Rockefeller in the White House.
Yeah. So it was David Rockefeller that brought down Nixon.
Yes.
Because and so that Nelson Rockefeller could get in.
Right.
Then Jimmy Carter. So then what happened is that they brought in an ET abductee, Jimmy Carter, to knock out Ford, so that Rockefeller couldn't assassinate Ford and become president. That's kind of what I think was the story there.
Yeah.
So so basically, and it's very interesting, the parallels between Paterno and Pope.
Yeah.
Because I think that's right now the Bilderberger black nobility is probably maneuvering to where they have a Paterno Pope situation where Ratzinger goes away quietly. And then I'm looking at this book here called Petros Romanos, The Final Pope is Here, by Thomas Hoare and Chris Putnam. I'm not sure if you read that book.
No, it just came to my attention yesterday, actually.
Okay. And this is what we're all waiting for. This is the next chapter of what I like to call the upper theater of the New World Order. And by upper theater, I mean this is where all the grand archetypal figures come in: the false prophet, the Antichrist, and all of these kind of archetypal figures in the New World Order who have been prophesized. And so there's a lot of figuring and one way or the other. People can go to exopolitics.com. Now, what the book says is a very lengthy book, and it's kind of interesting. It says, it turns out that the Vatican and the Pope are the Antichrist in prophecy. Are the false prophet in prophecy, and it's the UK throne that is the Antichrist, and that's all part of the New World Order. And you can go to a very excellent interview that we have on Exopolitics TV. You can get it at exopolitics.com. That in which we have around Prince William being groomed to be the future Zionist king or the Antichrist.
Right.
And that thing has gone viral around the world. I released the interview on purpose to be timed directly after the royal wedding, when they were rolling out Willie and Kate here in Canada as his first visit here, as his to his royal subjects. See, the British Crown is the head of state here in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So people internalize it as kind of the next thing to God here, and really enmesh themselves with the royal family as kind of an altar family. And so that if you look at the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is masquerading as a disinformation piece,
Mm-hmm.
Prince William really fills and fulfills all of the qualifications of the world's first Zionist king.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is a if you look at Hallett, the latest Hallett report, his contention was that in fact Queen Victoria's 9 official children, she was drugged in the conception of each of them, and the actual father was not Prince Albert, who never did that. He was in fact related to her, and that the head of the Rothschilds, Leon Rothschild, I think at that point, was the father of the 9 children, and that then they parceled out each of the 9 children to all of the monarchies of Europe, and that's why they called the black monarchies, because they're all Rothschilds.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they set up World War I, so that they'd all be headed up by Rothschilds, so that Rothschild could make the money on World War I. For example, Henry Ford made $1 trillion in World War I dollars. He made $1 trillion. No, it was not Henry Ford. It was Rockefeller.
Rockefeller?
The original Rockefeller made $1 trillion in World War I. Rockefeller being Rothschild's agent.
Mm-hmm.
But the point being is that from Victoria forward, all of the children, the 9 children of Victoria, including the Windsors coming out from her, were all Rothschilds, and all of the monarchs in Europe are Rothschilds. So that's why they're the black monarchs, and that's why we've had World War I and World War II, because we have that Rothschild genealogy. And so in William, we have the Rothschild, and we have the first Zionist king, and Kate on her side is a Rothschild also. They did I've seen the genealogy on that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the ultimate expression of the protocols, and now there's been and now the latest move, so that you have the resignation of the Dutch Queen happening about 2 weeks ago, the abdication.
Right.
You have the Pope stepping down, and now a House of Commons committee just opened up a serious investigation into the Queen's finances. So all of that's being kind of orchestrated, and there's a bill that has gone in now where that would set up the conditions whereby Charles would be passed over and it would go to William. Because if you go to the protocols of the Elders of Zion, you'll see that Charles does not qualify to be king. He has committed too many human peccadillos,
Right.
He's like too weak. And whereas William commands the respect of the people, and he's kind of seen as this honorable person,
Right.
Whereas Charles is more like he's more like his other son. It's kind of a moral laggard.
Right.
So that's that looks like to be that scenario, but that's the New World Order. The New World Order scenario. The problem with it is that it's so transparent and everybody kind of gets it. So the issue is how long is the world population going to be kind of taken in by this mesmeric
trance.
Upper theater that we have. If we look at the main characters of New World Order upper theater, and we go to kind of the cathedral of New World Order, which is Westminster Hall in London, there have been only 3 personages in modern times to speak in Westminster Hall, and that's the Pope, Ratzinger, the Queen, Elizabeth Windsor, and the Obama. Obama spoke there on May 25th, 2011. And they did a bunch of, the archbishops there, as he came in, did a bunch of MK Ultra hand signals on him. You can see it in the videotape as he walks in, and he got dazed, and he put down May 24th, 2011 by mistake. And I know that because May 24th is my birthday. It's also Bob Dylan's birthday.
Right.
And so I'm I kind of follow that, you know?
Right.
And so we know that Obama's under MK Ultra control, right? But so that Obama is kind of he's like a John the Baptist to the Antichrist.
That's what it feels like.
Prince William.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that's what it feels like. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have a tremendous global machine behind Obama, and in the U.S., you know, I mean, look how, you know, he's got this media machine, and so a lot of people in the U.S. have been disaffected, but at the same time, it is a powerful machine. So it's just to see how long does this show go on? Some people say 2015, some people say 2016. Now, you brought up the question of the meteor, the Kawasi-Yankee-No meteor, the ones in Russia and the ones in Cuba. And so is that meteor and that meteorite, are they part of the Nemesis Planet X system? And is that real? And people can go to Exopolitics.com, and you'll see an article that we just put up this week with some recent sightings at a volcano in Costa Rica by Marshall Masters, where they've tracked for 6 weeks this object that looks, you know, it's not like one of those double sun objects, which are kind of up there. They're sort of like UFO sightings.
Right.
This is sort of fairly steady. So there's that question there. There's a 1971 DARPA chronovisor. Chronovisor is a time travel technology. It's sort of like a holographic television for going to any point in the time-space hologram. You can dial up any point like A, B, C, D, or E, F, Y, G, and go to that point and get a picture of that point. So in 1971, there was a one-time probe to 2013 by DARPA, chronovisor probe. And one of my colleagues, chrononaut Andrew D. Bishago, was one of the chrononauts that participated in that. And they found in 2013, and we're now in 2013, it would be around June, the U.S. Supreme Court under 100 feet of brackish water, which means that Washington, D.C. Yeah, Washington, D.C. would be under 100 feet of brackish water. Now, fast forward to 2010, another colleague of mine, head of the Farsight Institute, Dr. Courtney Brown, who incidentally wrote the foreword to my book Exopolitics, he assembled the largest number of military-trained remote viewers in history, and they were looking at the year 2013 for what global warming might be, and what they found, 39% of the remote viewers found a global coastal event in June 2013. One of the targets was Washington, D.C., the capital, and they found it about the same condition as the U.S. Supreme Court, right next to deep water, totally wiped out. Melbourne was, all of the global coastal cities were demolished, and under different conditions of, transportation, no housing. The Sydney Opera House was gone, people straggling out. And so you say, well, what causes that, right? And one of the things that causes that, you can say, oh, well, our twin sun, 50 to 80% of the solar systems in our galaxy are dual sun solar systems. A single sun solar system is the exception. So our solar system apparently has a twin sun, which they posit as a brown dwarf it may come into our system periodically, and it comes at about not a 90, but somewhere between a 45 and a 90 degree angle from the ecliptic. So it comes in, so you can't see it. You don't see it until the last moment. And that's why they have the telescope down at the South Pole. So, and many scientists have been assassinated, since it was first reported from the IRAS, the NASA telescope, satellite-based telescope, in 1983, and it was reported on the front page of the Washington Post and the LA Times. I've got a copy of the clipping here in my office. And so it's a typical cover-up, like 9/11, everything else.
Right.
And so now they're getting good images of the possible one from the Costa Rica volcano. You can go to exopolitics.com and look at our recent article called "Is Earth on a Positive Timeline, 2013 to 2025?" And you'll see the link there into that study. So because some people say that we've shifted timelines, and now I started in this whole thing back in 1973. At the end of 1973, 1972, I was general counsel to the Environmental Protection Administration of the city of New York, and I saw that the positivist paradigm was not solving things. So I asked to meet I wanted to meet a parapsychologist, and I met a professor at Rutgers University who was an experimental psychologist and an expert in parapsychologists and extraterrestrial studies. And by the summer of 1973, I had written my first book, The Age of Cataclysm, which integrated earth sciences with parapsychology and the science of psychic prediction, namely the Edgar Cayce prophecies, and looking at those among others. And Cayce himself had a remote viewing of a global coastal event, which is the same global coastal event that the DARPA time travel saw, which is the same global coastal event
that Courtney Brown and his team saw. That
Courtney Brown saw. So you have all of these three data points that I've been following since 1973.
Right.
And here we are, what are we in now? 2013, that's 40 years. So, and at the same time, it feels to me like we're not on a catastrophic timeline. But then these meteors start to come in, and the Greenland ice cap starts to melt, and some people say, oh, it's this huge ET craft that's doing it. So the answer is, I think that we really have to just watch the data day by day by day, and at the same time know that we may have shifted timelines onto a positive timeline.
Well, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I hope that that's the case, because it really did feel like, for me, my research around the timeline material, obviously there are different nodes at different junctures throughout what we would call history, or what we agree upon as the past. But for me, the big moment in the most recent version of the timeline is 11/22/63 in Dallas at Dealey Square, when JFK is assassinated. Because at that point, based on Saturn being in the sign of Aquarius and a number of other factors, it feels to me like we moved to an alternate timeline, that everything that could have proceeded out of Kennedy and his presidency was obliterated and wiped out. And another reality got inserted in place after that. And a lot of that has to do with Majestic 12 and Project Monarch, and a lot of the disinformation and programming that went along with the 60s, and things like LSD being inserted into public awareness, and the satanic influence. And I know this sounds really, I used to be in the music business, but coming from me, it sounds strange, but the satanic influence in rock music and film and cinema. And that's a whole other timeline. And then what happens, on 9/11, 2001, is that because we had so much time elapse, theoretically, from the 11/22 event, we have another event which theoretically would cement or seal that timeline. But, as a result of that, now we had time elapse, which instead of taking from 1963 to 2001, it went from really 2001 to 2012, 11 years. We have the Sandy Hook event, which again is an effort to keep us locked in to a particular timeline or a particular grid. But there's something else happening. There's a timeline that we can't necessarily track via an event. And I think, and I'd love your thoughts on this, I think that this has to do with the explosion of awareness that I see taking place in people's lives, and people becoming aware and awake as to what's taking place on a global and planetary level. And it may not show up on CNN, it may not show up on Fox News, it may not show up on the headlines of Yahoo, but I can attest to the fact that this is taking place. All you have to do is go into the comments section on almost any post on Yahoo that is remotely political, and you will see comment after comment after comment that people are snapping out of their trance. And so while we're having this maelstrom of information that is really trying to lock us into this particular dark timeline, as above, below, an equally powerful event is taking place that we can't always track. The only time that we can track it is when we have two people coming together in real time, like you and I are doing right now, and being able to exchange our own perceptions and our own witnessing to what's taking place, and other moments where people will be able to do this and confirm that this is actually occurring. So I think you are right, and I think that this quote-unquote positive timeline, or what I would call the true Aquarian age versus the false Aquarian age, are actually kind of competing for our attention right now.
That is absolutely brilliant. It's funny. Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez, who was in the Kennedy motorcade, and he was the chairman of the House Banking Committee, actually invited me down from New York to Washington. We had lunch together, and in 1976, and I helped him get the House Select Committee on Assassination started, which started up in January 1977 to investigate the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, along with Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X. we got that started with the help of the Black Caucus and Dr. Martin Luther King's widow, and it started with great promise with a staff director, Richard Sprague, who was very good. He was a Philadelphia prosecutor, and then the CIA came in and just took it over and as you say, kind of diverted it back. So I've been down in the trenches litigating the assassination of John F. Kennedy in the Congress and elsewhere for all these years, and that what you say is very true, I believe.
So this has nothing to do with maybe it does, the subject matter we're talking about. But you were in New York City on the ground in the late '60s. Were you part of John Lindsay's staff?
Yeah, I was general counsel and assistant administrator of the Environmental Protection Administration, which ran the Department of Air Resources, Water Resources, Department of Sanitation, Noise Abatement, Solid Waste. The budget of the Department of Sanitation alone was larger than the budget of the United Nations, and so it was quite a job, and it was at the beginning of the environmental movement, so it was very very interesting. And part of what occurred to me at that time was part of my job is I used to have to go out and give speeches to the public. I was very frequently in the newspapers and in the media there. And one day I got an invitation, and this group came up and picked me up to give a speech, and it was very unusual. And I traveled all the way down, almost down to Washington, and I ended up in this nondescript office building in this large room talking to about 50 men in suits. And I knew instantly that they were not an environmental group. They looked like a group of intelligence officers. And in fact, later on we figured out that they were DARPA and CIA personnel who had time-traveled a copy of my book, Exopolitics, Politics, Government, and Law in the Universe, back from 2005. They had gone and gotten a copy of it and time-traveled it back to at least 1971, where it was seen by 3 separate witnesses, one of whom has reported that to us. And they wanted to get a look at me in the flesh in 1971, because they knew that today in 1973, in 2013, I would be on the radio with you talking about these issues and exposing the technology of time travel.
Interesting stuff, Alfred. You've in April of last year, I think it was 2012, right? You launched Exo University. Is that right?
Yeah. That's our platform for exosciences, sci-sciences, and exopolitics online, and I launched it after a college in the university system here said, well, why don't you prepare a curriculum on exopolitics? And I did so, for a course. And I met with the head of their department and one of the high members of the administration, and they said, oh, you're 10 years ahead of your time. And I saw that I was just dealing with their fears. So we said, yeah, we just got to launch our own universities. And people can find it online at exouniversity.org. Mm-hmm. And we have many different courses by leading researchers in the area of ETDNA, and all just a whole wide range of subjects.
Mm-hmm.
And, check it out.
One of the things that I discovered on your webpage, not your webpage, but your Facebook page, and I didn't really get a chance to look at it, were it looked like they might have been Russian, and you claim that they are alien hybrids who exist on radiation. Can you talk about these two men, or are hybrid aliens?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I guess I might as well break the news here. People can go to exopolitics.com and see the interviews there. This is a young Russian couple that claim that they exist on radiation, and the male has some very advanced ideas. And I since have had, just today, have been interactions with a friend that were backed up by interactions with her husband, and they tried to help them for 3 weeks, and they had a very strange experience, and there was a lot of backup in it. It looks like they might be involved with the Russian secret police, and it might be disinformation. So they're not at all what they seem to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I myself just learned about this an hour before going on the air with you in this program.
Mm-hmm.
So I have sort of changed some of the information on my website, but I haven't quite fully figured out what to do because I just want to do it in a way that doesn't create a lot of noise and backlash. But that's kind of what the current circumstance is that a lot of that information may be good information mixed in with disinformation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just putting out a caveat. I put on our website, I just put out a caveat lector,
mm-hmm.
that this information is not the opinion of exopolitics.com.
Well, and you bring up kind of a really interesting point in that as people who research or try to unravel the mysteries surrounding quote-unquote truth, there are many instances where misinformation and disinformation does come up, and on the surface things can look really promising, and if you spend time with it after a while, there will be moments where we can unravel some of this and begin to see that that's exactly what it is. It's misinformation and disinformation, and even some of the best researchers get taken in from time to time because things look, so good on the surface. And so I think that one of the things that in our quest to understand and to know is to be able to take our time. I mean, it's happened to me on a number of occasions where I've bid at something, go, wow, this is really what's happening here, and lo and behold, I get an alternate view 2-3 days later. It's like, wow, I didn't really think about that. That's an interesting take. Maybe I should take more time. I'm not saying that that's the case with you, but I think we all, who are invested in this reality, we run up against this, and I think what we're doing over time is we're honing our ability to smell things out earlier, and or to lean on other people in our community to add missing pieces to areas we can't see or blind spots that we do have.
Yeah, and here there was kind of a miraculous intervention which occurred,
mm-hmm.
because in my original in introduction with them, I asked 2 PhD scientists who live in Moscow, who are long-standing friends of mine, to join with them, and we had a 4-hour interaction, live video interaction with them. So the scientists got to interact with them. I got to interact with them, and it all seemed authentic.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't just me.
Right.
And then yesterday, we were supposed to do a live broadcast, and I see that we only have 5 minutes left. So bottom line is that today, just as I was supposed to go on the air with the Russian scientists, a friend called me who had been advised by U.S. intelligence in Russia that these two were being handled by Russian intelligence.
Interesting.
And it was real. So it was like a miracle.
Well, good. I mean, 4 hours is a lot of vetting. So, you know, I'm sure that in your mind you probably had a pretty clear idea.
Yeah, you know, and the thing about disinfo, I kind of picked it up from them at certain points. And if you go through the interviews, you'll see that I called them on it in the interview.
Right.
But, you know, there you go.
Well, since we only have 5 minutes left with you, Alfred, give us really kind of a pretty broad synopsis as to what you think will go down. I'm not even going to be that generous and say 6 months. Let's break it down to the next 3 months. What do you see?
For 3 months. Actually, the closer you make it, the harder it is.
Okay.
The longer you make it, the easier it is.
Okay, let's go 6 months.
Look.
What's the difference?
That is kind of from a big picture point of view.
Yeah.
In 2025, will we have a dystopia or a utopia? And I'm betting on a utopia, although sometimes I go, oh my God, we'll have a dystopia here.
Right.
Okay? And more and more I'm starting to think is that we'll have what humanity votes for. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I get up every day and I just work as hard as I can to bring positive information to people and try and help them understand that the more that we all work together to create a positive future here on Earth, then that's what's going to happen.
I would agree with that. Absolutely.
Because we are in, and you know, this is not oversimplifying complex science, but we are in a reality that we are creating, and so this is humanity's fundamental lesson, I think, for this era, for this next era.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, my prediction is this: that the more the positive messengers can come to the fore, the more humanity will prosper. That's my prediction.
Alfred Weber, it's been an absolute delight having you on the show and gracing us with your insight and experience and your wisdom and all your sordid tales of secret societies and their,
God.
and their progeny. So we appreciate that, and you're welcome to come back anytime. And continued success on exopolitics.com and exouniversity.org and all the other stuff that you do. You also do a broadcast on Ustream, right?
No, that was on Google Hangout, and I went to do it yesterday, and Google Hangout had blocked me because they didn't want me to do it with the Iravia couple. So I don't know what my status is now. I mean, it's a strange world that we live in.
I know. One day the door is open, and the next day
and then the next day is closed. So you never know.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, and take good care, and take good care of yourself. All right. Okay.
Thank you, and this has been a great pleasure.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you. See you around, Alfred. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Alfred Labramonte Weber, the head of Exopolitics.com, exouniversity.org, and he writes for the Examiner and gets a lot of traffic on his Examiner site. There are various websites that are linked to the show page if you want to find out more about him. It's an interesting 90 minutes of in-depth interview with one of the preeminent researchers of our time, and thrilled to have him. And I owe it to you because you wanted him. You wanted him to be on the show, and that's how it works. I'm trying to get more people that you want on the program and hear what they have to say about the strange times that we're going through. We did not talk about Chris Dorner. And yesterday I spent a lot of time doing research on the Chris Dorner event, and I have some mind-blowing connections around this. And I have been at a crossroads as to whether or not I want to put them up on my website. The piece is almost done. I spent all day working on it yesterday. Or do I want to send it out to people who receive my newsletter? And I think I'm gonna send it out to the newsletter people. And I'll tell you why. The newsletter people are a very supportive group, and they actually pay me $3.99 a month for me to send them a newsletter. And I may repurpose some of the Dorner material later for the site, but they're going to get it, and they're going to get the bulk of the research that I did. And trust me, I am a good judge of my own research, and this is top level stuff. This is prime stuff, and it dovetails with what Alfred was talking about with the Pope, because I believe that what we saw in Big Bear was an event which is part of the Pope stepping down and paving the way for the entity or the energy that we would call the Antichrist. And I will get into that in the newsletter. So if you want to get it, sign up for the newsletter. This is a pitch for the newsletter, okay? And if you don't want to get it, well, it's your loss, and one of the world's great mysteries will elude you, and your life will be forever vacant as a result of that. So, it's your call. Do you want the newsletter or not? You can actually, if you're interested in subscribing to the newsletter, robertphoenix.com. I have a big fat link. You also, by subscribing to the newsletter, you get a 6-month forecast printed out. So it's a good deal. You get the newsletter, and the newsletter is going to be twice a month this month because of the information that I covered yesterday. It's normally once a month. I'm sorry, I can only, but it's an 8 to 10 page newsletter, so it's pretty thick, and it's almost always content not available on the site. So it's exclusive content, and so you'll get that. You'll get 12 newsletters, and you get a 6-month astrological preview for the coming year. Okay, starting from the day I created for you. So it's a pretty good deal. And I think, what are we charging for that? $44. That's 12 issues of the newsletter plus a 6-month report. 6-month report alone, if you go to various websites, that's going to set you back anywhere between $30 to $40, maybe $50, depending upon the website. Probably about $30 to $40. So it's good value. It's absolutely good value. On Monday, I am hoping to have another guest on. There are lots of guests coming our way. A good friend, Kenji Williams, who is a musician, and he has, when I first met Kenji, he was playing violin and mixing some beats at a very kind of funky, grassrootsy, ravey level. Well, Kenji Williams has become now a world-class musician, taking a spectacular multimedia performance called Bella Gaia around the world. And Kenji's going to be here in Austin on the 23rd, and we're going to try and catch up. And I would love to get him on the show and talk about his music. And he's a really bright guy. He's a filmmaker, he's a painter, he's a violinist, he's a Gemini. So we just had Alfred on, Gemini, and Jupiter's in my 7th house right now, so I may as well partner up with some Geminis, don't you think? So hopefully we'll have Kenji on the show on Monday. That would be great. If not, I'll try to get an interview with him and play it on Friday. Very talented guy. And we'll talk about Bella Gaia. Bella Gaia is a multimedia event which hopes to bridge various perspectives, global perspectives for people. Now, it's funded by the UN, whatever. I'll talk to Kenji about that. But I think Kenji's heart and mind and vision are in the right place, and hopefully we'll get him on here. You'll really enjoy him. And we'll play some of his music, which is spectacular. So hopefully we get Kenji on Monday, Wednesday, navigating the astrological matrix as always. And then Friday, who knows what Friday will bring us. I'm still trying to get my mystery guest from last Monday who did not show up on the show. But hopefully it was 2 Mondays ago. Hopefully I can get him on next Friday. Cross your fingers. It'd be a good score for the show. Again, giving you more information to kind of get through the world that we're living in right now, which is really, really strange, very unusual. May you live in interesting times is an understatement. Let me tell you. Okay, so why don't we wrap it up early and let people get on with their day today. I want to thank everybody in the chat room, best chat room on the internet. You're loyal, you're devoted, you're friendly, you're fun. You've got a great chemistry and a great vibe in there. New people are always welcome. So, kudos and props to everybody in the chat room. And thanks for showing up. And thanks to everybody from out there in Radio Land showing up and listening either live or through the podcast. Really appreciate your support. And it's through the feedback that I get from you, both spoken and unspoken, that I continue to do what I do and bring guests on to hopefully bring more awareness to your life so that you can make better choices and see the world more clearly. Sometimes not always easily, because it can be a painful experience going through an awakening process. It's not the easiest thing to do. That's why most people want to stay asleep, by the way. It's kind of like the junkie who doesn't want to get off the drugs. They'd rather just stay on drugs because they know that getting off the drugs is going to be one of the most painful things they'll ever experience. Well, the same thing can be said for people that have a latency issue with waking up. Waking up is not easy. It's painful. You know what happens when you wake up? You break your brain. That's what happens. Your brain hurts. You get headaches. You force your brain to do things and your muscles in your brain to break their patterns, which calls into, this whole notion of plasticity. We are, this plasticity that we are continue to grow and forge a will and expand our abilities over time. That contrary to Sigmund Freud, we are not done at 5, and we're not done at 55. So, yeah, you wake up, and guess what happens? Your plasticity returns. You become alive, you become vital. But you've got to get through the darkness. You've got to get through the dark night. You've got to be able to see it. And that's not the easiest thing to do. But once you get through the dark night, once you have died to the perception of the world, then it becomes easier, a lot easier. You see, that's what separates a lot of people that's what separates people that are in the quote-unquote camp that is psychopathic or satanic or Luciferian or manipulative, right? This is what separates them in some ways from the rest of the public, because they've died. They've died. They understand that people are just bags of meat on some level, right? They have died to the luxury that quote unquote life matters. And there's various reasons as to why they have died. There are various scenarios. They can be ritualistic, it can be indoctrination, whatever. But then once they've died, they just say, well, we can do whatever we want. We have no conscience. Well, that's the extreme. That's the extreme point of view. But if you die to the world in your own way and retain your conscience, then it's a whole different ballgame. And that's hopefully what we're doing here. We die to the assumptions of what the world is and who runs it and why and what we're actually here to do and what this is all about. And then once we do, then we can have a much clearer point of view and perspective and allow us to make different choices and have different types of relating. Let me just give you an example of one of the types of relating I'm talking about. Actually, there are two examples. This morning, I was on Facebook, and I got a Facebook text from somebody, and he's probably going to listen to the show. That's okay. And the text was that I was not visiting his page and not commenting on his stuff enough. And I thought, well, this is interesting. It was kind of cryptic, but it was interesting. So I asked myself, well, how do I respond to this? Do I respond with indignation, or do I respond in a different kind of way to try to understand what's going on here? And I chose the latter, and who knows how I did as a result. But, you know, I'm trying to understand, take time out of my life to understand why somebody feels that way. Because we have a choice. I think we have a choice into how we respond. It's not easy, because so many of us are programmed from childhood, and the first thing that happens, you know, that we get is the programming from our parents. We spend most of our lives untangling from the programming while somehow trying to retain some of the pearls of wisdom they either consciously or unconsciously tried to pass on to us. That's the first and primary relationship. And once we untangle that, then it becomes a lot easier. For some people, their parents actually have to physically die in order for that to occur. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And once you do that, as Jesus said, you must leave your parents, and then you can have some perspective. So I did the best of my ability to sort of respond beyond my programming. And who knows, hopefully it worked. But that's where we are, to see the world clearly, to discern what's real, right? And to use our heads to do that, to stay our hearts to stay open to what's possible. And that's the motto of the show. It's funny, I was in line the day before Valentine's Day at the local market. And you know, it was one of those 10-item lines. It was a 10-item line. And we all know that going through the 10-item line, sometimes it's a 12-item line. Maybe it's a 13-item line. Maybe it's a 9-item line. Maybe if it's an 8-item line, you carry over the 2 items that you didn't bring in, so you can do the 12-item. You know, there's all kinds of weird kind of justification that goes down in the 10-item line. So I was in the 10-item line. This is the day before Valentine's Day. And there's a guy he's in front. He's in the front of the line. And I'm counting at least 30 items in the 10-item line. And I'm trying to figure out what the hell is going on here. And he's wearing a button-up shirt without a tie, and probably middle-aged white guy, like myself, right? And there are 2 women ahead of me, and we start talking like, hey, what's going on up here? You know? I mean, that guy's got more than 10 items. And they're going, yeah, no, you know, I'm thinking, interesting. So then I watch it a little bit further, and not only does he have more than 10 items, check this out. This is what he did. He split his massive, things in 2. His massive grocery haul, he split them in 2. Like, I'll put maybe 11 on this one and 15 on this one. So he was there pushing the envelope on and probably paying with the same card. And I thought to myself, what the hell is going on here? Why is this guy doing this? And it's like, and we do it all the time. And even myself, man, I catch myself. It's like sometimes we get away with what we can, right? We justify whatever it is that we're going to do. We justify. And then we move on. So this guy was in a major, major act of justification, let me tell you. So then he gets out of line, and then we start talking to the clerk about it. I said, hey, why didn't you throw the hammer down on that guy? And she started laughing. And I said, oh, you think it's funny? I said, this is how psychopaths are enabled. You allow them to have 20 items. And she said to me, well, he looked, he looked like the type of person that would abuse the 10-item limit. And I said, well, this is how psychopaths are enabled. Of course they don't look that way. And you've just given him credence. And I was saying this jokingly, of course. You've just given him credence to now go out and steal $500,000 from somebody's bank account or take their house. Why? Because he got away with it at the checkout line with 10 items. This is what happens. Now, had I been next to him, I would have said something. But I was having too good of a time talking with the two women in line. I didn't care, whatever. I mean, I'm a hermit most of the time anyway, so when I go to the grocery store, it's like my, it's like my social event of the week. So I really didn't begrudge spending that time in line, especially since I got to talk to two happy and open people. But then, what was really ironic is that one of the women, the woman behind him, she had venal sin number 2 for lines. You know what that is? It's not more items than you could have at the checkout stand. No, it's having a bulk item without a code. Bad move. Why? Because the bulk item without a code automatically has to be dealt with by a runner. A giant bag of malted milk balls for her father. I found this out. I found out many things in life. That took another 5 minutes. So you just surrender, you just go with the flow, right? Who knows? Who knows what would have happened had I left 5 minutes earlier? We never know. You never know. That's the mystery of life. Okay, so once again, thanks to Alfred Weber, Alfred Labramonte Weber from Exopolitics.com. And covered a lot of ground today. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say open what's possible. If we can manage it, Kenji Williams, the visionary and creator of Bella Gaia, here on Monday. If not, well, I'm sure I'll have plenty to talk about. Take care. Love you all. And see you on the other side of the weekend.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.